Welcome to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. I'm Pete Mezzetti. My guest this evening is Department of Revenue Services Commissioner Mark Boughton. Commissioner Boughton, welcome. How are you, my buddy?
Good to see you.
You too. What's new?
I got to give you credit because you get the best guests.
Right.
And you are very consistent about your content and putting out your content. That's a big deal.
It is.
When you're doing these shows. People know that they can tune in, that you're going to have hopefully something interesting or thought-provoking.
Right.
And that you're always putting up new content. So good for you, man.
Well, thank you, man. How you been?
I'm okay. Busy. A lot of stuff going on within the state. And we're excited about a lot of different things. And also on the infrastructure portfolio, there's, as you notice, there's a lot of cones up out there. And,
right.
A lot of construction going on all summer. Out this way, obviously, the Gold Star Bridge is really ramping up now. And
right.
A lot of work on 95, 84. Not such a big issue here, but certainly in the middle of the state. And 91, too. So there's things going on, man.
Absolutely. Now, what's going on with Department of Revenue Services?
Well,
tax season's over.
It's never really over.
Oh,
okay. So, just so for the viewers out there, so you know, April 15th is our cutoff.
Right.
And actually, in New London County, you have till we marry the IRS date because they're of the flooding. So I think you have till beginning of June if you live in New London County. But April 15th is the cutoff, and then that's about 70 to 75% of the returns, and then about 25 to 30% of the folks out there file for an extension.
Yeah.
Their deadline is October 15th.
Right.
But we can get a pretty good gauge of what's going on out there on these returns based on what we've received so far. And then we spend most of the summer working hard. And of course, we have audits that are going on all the time. We have enforcement folks that are out there doing enforcement work. We've got a new team out there doing that we can talk about. We have our new revenue forecasting team that's out there looking at different models and analytics. So a lot of different things are happening. But the big news.
Yes.
The big news is that taxpayers this year saw the largest cut to the state income tax in the history of this state. So we lowered the brackets down. In fact, if you made about $45,000, and maybe you have a child or two, you got the earned income tax credit as well, which went up dramatically. You don't have an income tax. I mean, we're most likely writing you a check or you're not paying anything. So good stuff for our taxpayers. And I want to thank Governor Lamont. Obviously, the legislature, that was bipartisan vote.
Oh, was it?
Absolutely. And but this governor, we work really hard on this. This year we didn't have as much latitude, so the boss and I put together a little program to eliminate professional fees for certain professions. Nurses, I think, is in there. Teachers, things like that. Areas that we need to recruit, as a way to give people a break. And we'll go back at it again for the next budget, which starts next year. But things are going to be a little tougher. It's going to be a little tougher the next biennium.
Oh, really?
But
what is that?
Well, I think revenues are flattening. And I think that, all the federal money is sort of washed through the system. So there's no more ARPA money and things like that. This next biennium, the 2-year budget, will be challenging. We have fiscal guardrails in place that the governor, the whole finance team is absolutely committed to keeping there because it protects some of these long-term costs that have just buried us in the past from us being buried by it now. So I think there'll be some battles to fight. But I will say this, that Governor Lamont has said clearly, and I've certainly parroted this everywhere I go, no new taxes.
Right.
He will not sign a bill that raises taxes in any area. Certainly there's always adjustments, so be careful, but the big broad sweeping raises, you certainly won't see them this year.
Okay. Now let's talk about the different departments you have in.
Sure. So I'll give you kind of a breakdown, about 600 employees that report through our management team. Our deputy commissioner is John Biello, really good guy. He's been there about 33 years. And, in past, some commissioners have brought in their own deputy, but taxes is such a complex and complicated section of our statutes that I wanted to make sure that I had an experienced team. So I brought in John as my deputy. He does a fantastic job. So he kind of acts, because I'm pulled away so much for the infrastructure stuff, he acts as sort of a COO, a chief operating officer that reports to me. And then we have different departments within our agency. So we have an auditing department. They just do audits. We have a team of lawyers that do something we call the appellate divisions, where you can appeal your audit if you don't like the results. And then they ultimately sometimes, about maybe a dozen times a year, end up in court. defending our final determination on an audit. There's also people that work closely with businesses, so we have a small division that does that. We also have an enforcement team of about a dozen certified post officers that can make arrests. But we don't do that, but they could.
Right.
Technically, we have we call him the chief. Our chief is from Chief Sullivan, who used to be the chief of police in Hamden. Runs our enforcement division, and those folks do a lot of undercover work. They'll do a lot of research, and certainly when things get criminal, we'll partner up with the state police and other entities to ensure that the law is enforced. So we have that team as well. And we have a collections division. They're the people that just they either give you a ring or they put the bill in the mail, and then they follow up, deal with our small businesses, and they're always very, very busy as well. So we've got a big agency with a lot of responsibility. Remember, we do $22 billion of taxes over 40 different tax types or groups. So it's a lot. And you can't be missing zeros.
No.
Otherwise, not only do we not get to pay the police officer and the firefighter and the teachers,
right.
we don't get paid either.
Exactly.
So
Right.
we got to make sure that we do it right. So it's a lot of responsibility. As I mentioned, very detailed, sometimes painful, but is something that is incredibly necessary to run government. And at the end, we've talked about this before. I'm a Republican, but I believe in government, and I believe that government, can do good things. Like the governor, we have we're adverse to taxes, but he's a Democrat, but we've been friends for a long time now. But I'm not cynical about what our government, both at the federal, state, and local level, can do. And of course, coming from local government,
right,
that is the closest to the people, right? I'm sure you have Carl Fortuna was in here, a great guy.
Oh, yeah.
Will Saybrook, so I'm sure you have your guests in here that talk about that.
Now, let me ask you this. We talked about April 15th being gone and past. The date of April 15th is done.
Yep.
But then, if you file an extension, you have till October.
You do.
What happens if you don't file by the October date?
You're in big trouble. But so a couple things to remember too. If you file for an extension, you still have to pay us in April. So you have to make an estimated payment of what you think you're going to owe.
Okay.
While you pull your stuff. Now, if you overpay us, obviously you're going to get a refund.
Yeah.
And we'll return it to you. But it doesn't vitiate you from the responsibility of having to actually pay that number. People think they can get an extension now have to pay till October. It doesn't work that way. It can be very frustrating. But look, we would then move you into some kind of enforcement proceeding. We would probably reach out to you first to find out what's happening. That's where our collections department will start, and they can escalate it to the next level, which would be, you may end up getting a full-blown audit, which, look, our auditors are great people. My direction to them is to be reasonable and rational and friendly and try to help people out of problems versus creating problems.
Right.
But the statutes are very tight, and sometimes we can't just make stuff go away.
No.
So you don't want to end up there, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Now, if you end up there, what's the...
So it takes us about, depending on the complexity of the audit, let's say about 15 months. Now, some of them we can do a lot quicker. We can do them in 3 or 4 months, and we'll make a determination, or we'll come to immediate agreement where somebody might say, oh, yeah, I do, I owe that. My bookkeeper forgot to send it in, and then we clean it right up. And I do have latitude. The commissioner has latitude to waive penalties and interest under certain circumstances.
Okay.
COVID, we had a lot of appeals on penalties and interest. And there was some stuff we did waive based on, why didn't you pay? Well, here's what happened. God forbid my accountant told me he did and he didn't. Then he got COVID and he was in the hospital for 6 months. So stuff like that. So generally speaking, it takes about a year to clean up an audit. It goes back 3 years. Okay. So it's not just this year. We're going to go back and look at 3 years and go forward. The biggest issue we have is people don't comply, so they won't drop off the documents. Their attorney or their accountant may try to slow the process down and on purpose, because they don't want to pay, and so then that becomes a much larger issue for us. But it's a arduous process. and something that's really, really important. Every auditor can generate and does generate between $2 and $3 million a year. So it's a it's a very good place to find what's owed our Connecticut taxpayers. And remember, this people say, oh, I don't want to pay the government. This isn't the government's money. This is your money.
Right.
And so if somebody's not paying their full liability, you have to pick up the slack and pay for them. That's why you want me out there doing as many audits as possible and as much enforcement as possible, because then we all have to pay more.
Right.
You know, because it's a zero-sum game when it comes to government. You know, the plow truck is a plow truck. It costs what it costs.
Right. Now, start to finish, roughly, how long does an audit take? Or does it depend?
Again, depends on the complexity. I've got some that have been out there years, but those typically are folks that are very complex, and they may have questions of law that are involved, as well as a determination about multiple accounts that they're trying to pay from or think they don't owe. So that could happen. But like I said, we generally range about 14 to 15 months. We are trying. Our goal with our new team there is to get it under a year. So the average generic, not the easy ones, just the full-blown ones,
right,
should take less than a year. We're going for 8 months is our goal.
Okay.
Which is good,
right?
Because it can take people out of limbo too. And there are other areas where it's very people. It's a funny business because people don't realize that. Restaurants, for example, I can tell you whether they're paying their full liability and sales tax simply by looking at their federal return. I don't have to do an audit. I can look at their credit card charges and times that by 6.35%, and I can figure out exactly if they're paying their full liability on the credit card charges. And most restaurants now are using cards. Very few are still on a cash basis. And then I know the balance of the cash. If they didn't pay their full amount there, they didn't pay the full amount of the cash. So once we do that, usually they'll come running in and go, oh, wait a minute, we made a mistake. But again, that's not my money. It's not the state's money. It's the taxpayers' money.
Right.
And we all have to pay more if folks aren't paying. And if you're a consumer and you bought a meal or you bought a service and that person doesn't pay their sales tax,
right,
you just got burned.
Yeah.
And they're stealing from the government. So we're on it.
Now, let's get into a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, so I was.
It all started way back when.
It all started way back when. I was born and raised in Danbury, Connecticut. I was educated in public schools. I did a little stint in the military right after high school to get money to go to college. I went to Central Connecticut State University where I earned a bachelor's degree, and later on I attended Western Connecticut State University where I earned a master's degree. But I don't have an accounting background. Everything I know about accounting and about business practices are OJT.
Right.
I did run a small business for many years, which I eventually gave over to at that time, my wife, which was a kitchen cabinet business. We designed, sold kitchen cabinets, counters, installed them.
Oh, cool.
We had 2 locations, about 20 employees, and we were grossing about $4 or $5 million a year. Didn't make any money, but we were grossing $4 or $5 million a year.
Right.
But what I took out of that is I got a feel for what our small business people go through.
Yeah.
And I understood that much better about worrying about making payroll or having to hire somebody or having to let somebody go. I learned a lot from that experience. But I also taught high school, and I taught high school for 14 years at Danbury High School, and left there in 2001 when I got elected mayor. But prior to that, I had served in the legislature for 2 terms. So I know Danbury, for those of you who don't know, is it's a Democratic city by registration. Yes. And I was blessed to get elected and reelected in Danbury 10 times.
Okay.
On a 2-year term. It's a 2-year term as mayor. So that was a lot of work, but a lot of fun. Great city. Good bones to it. Our mill rate is probably lower than a lot of your small communities around here.
Okay.
Although we have the largest school district in the state in terms of students, population.
Oh, really?
About 13,000 kids there. So we, I think I did a great job.
Yeah.
But I'm biased.
Right.
I get it. But and got involved in politics that way. And during that time period, like I said, I had been friendly with Governor Lamont. I'd known him for many years. And he'd call me every once in a while and say, Boughton, come work for me. And I'd say, no, I don't know what I'm doing. As you know, I ran for governor, and and
Yes,
came
you
very
did.
close in 2018. And I still had that politics in my blood, but there does come a point where after at about the 20-year mark at being mayor, this is strong mayor form of government. There's no
Right.
city manager. You're the boss.
Right.
I didn't think it was healthy for the city to have so much knowledge packed up in here.
Right.
And I had a tiny staff for a city of that size.
Oh, yeah?
Because I knew everything.
Right.
I could run the whole city off my cell phone. But I didn't think that was healthy in terms of where we were going in terms of democracy and giving people opportunities. So when the governor came to me that last time, I really thought about it. I said, yeah, I'm going to do it. It's time to turn over the reins. Let's get some new thoughts in here, new leadership, new ideas. And the city's got to chart, the new mayors, there's been 3 now, got to chart their course and do the best that I can. But so I've been the Commissioner of Department of Revenue Services since 2020, and I've been there going on 4 years. It'll be 4 years this December. So
Wow.
It's been great. It's been an honor to work for this governor. He's a great person. He really,
Is he?
Yeah. People don't. Too often times we get just sort of the two-dimensional TV thing, or a press conference or whatever. But I know this man behind the scenes too.
Yeah.
And a great measure of a person, I think, is how they interact with their family. He's a proud father and a very good family man, and he's got a great sense of humor. He's funny. Doesn't suffer fools, though. I mean, he will look at somebody. I know what he's thinking now, because he's looking at somebody going, "Get this guy or gal out of here." But he's really a terrific leader for our state. Bugging him to run a 3rd term. I don't know if he will. I don't think he will. It's not my business to really make that decision. That's a family decision. But I think the city would be well served with another 4 years of Ned Lamont as governor.
Now, I'm going to put you on the spot.
I mean, the state would be well served.
State.
Yeah.
Who's the mayor of the town of Danbury now?
Gentleman named Roberto Alves. And
Okay.
fun fact, Roberto was my student at Danbury High School. So
Really? So you know him.
I know him very well.
Good guy?
Yeah, he's a good guy. Yeah, sure. I mean, look, anybody that gets to that position is generally a pretty good person.
Right.
We've been lucky in Danbury. We don't have issues with corruption and, or anything like that. Last time we had a serious sort of incident was back in the 80s. So you can see that we've had good mayors over the years. I'm the longest serving at 20 years. My predecessor, who I took over from, he'd served 12. Somebody else has served 8. So that seat doesn't turn over a lot. It has, when I left, somebody did 1 year to fill out my term. Then somebody got elected for 2 years. Really good guy, Mayor Esposito. He was there for 1 term. And then Mayor Alves is there now, and he's there and is just completing his 1st year. So, yeah, I mean, but it's a funny place in the sense that, here we are, a city of 100,000 almost, and we've got a 21-member city council. 21 members.
21 members?
21 members, yes. But it's a weak council.
God.
It's a strong mayor, weak council form of government, and they only meet once a month, and the mayor leads the council, or she. So it's a really good place to learn governing and to. I mean, you're right there. You're right in the face of every triumph and every tragedy.
Now, before you were Department of Revenue Services Commissioner, do you remember who was?
Yeah. So there was. So I took over from. I mentioned my deputy, John Biello, and he did it for a year.
Yeah.
Deputy Commissioner Biello did it for a year. And then before that was a gentleman named Scott Jackson. Scott was a mayor.
I know Scott.
Yeah, Mayor Hamden. Then he was there, and then he left and went back to New Haven, and I'm not sure where he is now. And then prior to that was Kevin Sullivan, who was Commissioner of Department of Revenue Services under Governor Malloy.
Okay.
So it's it's interesting when you do these commissioner jobs. You could take 2 paths, 2 tracks, right? So one of them is to sort of be not a placeholder, but a gate, sort of just a keeper of all the lights burning and everything else.
Right, exactly.
Or you can be a disruptor, not disruptive, but a disruptor in the sense of business practices and trying to build a better mousetrap. So I've become the latter. I'm not disruptive, but I'm a disruptor. But I've got a great team that loves this stuff and loves trying new ideas and new things and experimenting to see it works, particularly when it comes to collections and things like that. So you got to get excited about it, and you got to run the department.
Yeah. You seem like you run a well-oiled machine.
It's
in the department.
I have to say it wasn't broken when I took over.
Oh, no?
And that's why I stuck with mostly internal people. I didn't bring anybody in from the outside. I didn't think we needed it. After I did an assessment after about a month or so, we did have a huge turnover last year of retirements.
Oh, yeah?
So that was a challenge, and it's still a challenge right now. Although, we're hiring groups of people, 20 people at a time, 30 people at a time.
Oh, man.
Remember that figure I told you about?
Yes.
For every auditor, it's about $2 million of revenue that's brought in. So you got to make sure you're fully staffed up in auditors. And we've got a new team out there working on cash businesses of about 15 auditors that we've assigned just to try to close something called the tax gap. Tax gap is that gap of what is owed versus what is collected.
Right.
And so we estimate and this is true for most states, tax gap ranges around 30 to 35%.
Oh,
So
wow.
basically, you're getting beat every time, by about 30% of businesses and of people, and sometimes it's intentional.
Right.
Many times it's intentional, many times it's not.
Right.
Think of the underground economy. Think of your landscaper, the housekeeper. You're somebody who works in a barber shop, whatever. Are they reporting all of their income?
Right.
And is that cash business reporting all the sales tax? So we've got a team now that's out conducting audits. Now these aren't full-blown audits. Basically, we'll ask for documents. We'll do a quick check. As I mentioned, how we can do that, right? A lot of the credit card business is done now, or debit cards.
Right.
We'll be able to figure it out, and we can tell pretty quickly if they're doing it right. And that's it. We don't. If they missed a payment, we'll remind them, but we don't. We're not there to shut them down. But we do want to make sure that they're remitting their sales tax. And I would tell you that, Pete, that's probably the number one area that we get beat, is on sales tax. People collect it and don't pay it.
Right. Which is not.
It could be criminal, depending on what you're doing. But we don't want to put anybody in jail. We just want to get our money.
You just want to pay. Yeah,
and we try to educate people why it's a bad idea. And I have to tell you, sometimes it's a language barrier. Sometimes people just don't know. So we have a whole team that's out there that speaks multiple languages and can sit down and sit with somebody at a table and explain exactly, in their business, we go to them, explain exactly how to do this and what paper to file.
And I'm assuming it's very easy to understand to file the.
It is once you get the hang of it. It is, and we have a system called MyConnect, brand new computer system that we've.
Yeah, what is it? I saw it on your website.
Yeah, it's a brand new front-facing system that people can use to file their income taxes and their professional fees and their sales tax if they owe it for their business. And it's pretty user-friendly. There's even a chat bot there. That's building on its knowledge base as it gets asked questions by the taxpayers.
Oh, cool.
So people are using that. But remember, too, if you use TurboTax, that also links into our system. That's how your accountant does it so quickly. People are like, well, he gets the TurboTax numbers, or you may even do it at home.
Right.
I have your return within seconds.
Right.
And we drop in your refund within about 3 days.
Yes.
Into your bank account. So, there's definitely opportunity there with MyConnect to get more data, which is really what I think the legislature and the governor need to make more strategic decisions going forward. Because we're going to face these, I wouldn't say call them headwinds, I would just say a calming time of our economy. Folks really got to know what's going on in terms of policymakers. Where's the money coming from? Who's making money? Who's not making money? Why aren't we collecting this? And that's what the tax gap analysis will show. We're actually going to post a report in July that's going to show we can raise X amount of money if we do the following things.
Right. Would you mind sticking around for another segment?
Love to.
All right, we'll be right back.
Okay.
Public Education and Government Access TV, or PEG, has continued to serve Connecticut for over 30 years, connecting communities with local information, entertainment, education, and a transparent source for local government meetings. During this time, we've earned the trust of our communities. We're different than commercial media. Public access stations are not a network. They are publicly funded organizations that serve each of the 169 cities and towns. While some stations are operated by cable companies, almost half of the stations in Connecticut are managed by local nonprofit stations, like the one in your community. In fact, PEG stations are some of the last independently owned and operated TV stations in the country. Large and small, rural and urban PEG stations reach both cable and internet customers in Connecticut each year, with hyper-local content that educates, informs, and inspires, and that reach extends beyond the screen. Local stations are active members in the community, working with families and educators to prepare children for future success, bringing attention to state and local issues, and playing a role in healthcare and veterans affairs. At PEG, we view our audience as residents, not as consumers. We deliver award-winning, local community programming, such as documentaries, science, history, sports, cooking, and arts to our audiences, when, where, and how they want to watch. Since PEG's founding, federal support and state funding legislation has always been the cornerstone of what makes this possible. A fee is assessed to cable companies on each customer as they use public rights-of-way to reach billable customers. This fee is passed on to fund PEG. Every year, PURA reviews PEG funding, performance, and community engagement. Each station has a unique budget that includes legislatively mandated funding, individual donations, as well as revenue from other fundraising and grant sources, fulfilling the vision for a public-private partnership. But no matter how much fundraising for stations in rural or underserved communities, funding dollars can represent more than half of their budget, and without it, they won't survive. And communities across Connecticut will lose access to this essential service. PEG stations are making a difference, strengthening communities, improving lives, and serving all residents in Connecticut.
Welcome back to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. I'm Pete Mezzetti, sitting here with Department of Revenue Services Commissioner Mark Boughton. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for sticking around. Okay. I don't know if we can talk about this or not, or we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot talking about this.
You're going to get me in trouble yet, but go ahead.
No, I'm not.
A lot of people watch this show.
Well, yes, but I'm not going to get you in trouble.
Okay.
The motor vehicle tax.
Yeah, it's a bad.
Could it work?
It's a bad tax, and I think, it's on my hit parade of taxes that I want to eliminate. The governor agrees 1,000%. He wants to eliminate it, but we can't do that at the expense of cities and towns losing that revenue.
Okay.
And that's the rub, right? So how do you do that? As mayor, I can tell you it was the biggest pain in the neck tax. We'd have poor seniors that might move to Florida or Arizona, and they'd call me up screaming because the initial tax was $200,
right,
but with penalty and interest, it was now $2,000. And then I'm like, listen, how old are you? 88. God bless you. I hope you live to be 108, but don't worry about it. If you're ever going to come back to Connecticut, don't worry about it. But,
right.
The point is that you would waste a lot of staff time, a lot of aggravation. Any tax collector in this area will tell you that. And for a tax that also ends up to be, and our tax incident study showed this, to be one of the most regressive taxes we have is the property tax and the automobile tax. So
right,
let's get rid of it. The question is, how do we do that without punching a hole in, and I can tell you in Danbury,
right,
our auto taxes are about $12 million,
all right,
12 to 14 million every year. And then you have something called the supplemental, which comes through in October, and those are additional cars that were registered after that July 1 date. That always be good for another 2 or 3 million. So it's a real hit. I'm sure Joe has spoken to that as well. Joe DeLong was here.
Yes. Yeah, Joe was here last week.
But we don't like the tax.
No.
And I think in terms of competitiveness, this state can do better when it comes to that. It's just, we had a task force this year. I served in the task force. It needed to meet about 20 more times and take about another year and a half to really lay a system down that we can develop that'll give faith and confidence to our municipalities, but also it'll help our taxpayers. In the end, I want our taxpayers to pay less.
Right.
To pay less.
Now, who's on the task force with you?
Well, they closed that one off.
Oh, got it.
So we have to have more discussion about that, and I'll be, the governor and I and the team at OPM will be talking about that this summer. I will tell you that I think the best way to do this, it's just an idea, and municipalities won't like this, but it has worked in other states. You should cap property taxes at 3%. So no hard cap, no property tax can go up more than 3% per year.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, in exchange for that, you're going to eliminate the property tax and figure out a way to replace that revenue. So you need a cap plus the replacement of revenue should put our cities and towns on a more sustainable path. Remember, they're not making any more land.
Right.
God's not making any more land. This is what we got is what we got. So, we saw people this year who did revals with negative. They dropped a percentage point or two on their valuation of all of their property in their community. And that means they've got less money to spend for programs and services. So we got work to do there, but I'd love to see it go away. It's just a pain in the neck.
Is it?
Again, I don't have to collect it anymore, so I don't care. But if you've had to pay it, and you can't register you can't register your car if you haven't paid it, right? So you have to run to town hall or city hall. You got to pay it off because you forgot that you had like a $50 bill from 3 years ago on the old Chevy that was sitting in the garage. Right. And then you have to go back and get a clearance form and bring it back to DMV so you can register your new car. It's a pain in the neck. But it's, again, it's a source of significant revenue for cities and towns. So we'll have to look at it.
Yeah, so probably not going to.
I don't see it happening in the short term.
No?
It's a long-term project, though, that I think we should undertake. And I think the governor is, he's always said to me, just put something in front of me that works, and we'll do it. So
Speaking of taxes, let's talk about the statewide cannabis tax.
Okay. It's, it's funny because I've always told people that cannabis sales will never be a huge tax generator.
Right.
And people would, as part of a selling point, I think people in the industry made the mistake of talking about the taxes all the time.
Okay.
I would tell people, don't talk about the taxes because it's not going to generate that much revenue. Understand we've got Massachusetts to our north that's done a very good job with how they did it. So they've already sort of surrounded the market. New York is the Wild West. It's legal, but they haven't really developed a market there. So you can really, the black market is just exploding in the state of New York. And so it isn't like we would be the first.
Right.
So we're not generating the kind of money you see, although, you've seen the projections. I think last quarter was around 13 million, 14 million, and we projected about 20 when the bill was passed. So I'm not alarmed by it because I keep telling people we didn't do this for the money. Now, cities and towns are getting checks out of this.
Okay.
If they invoice their dispensary, we provide the data for them, and we'll tell Westbrook, your dispensary owes you $22,000, and based on this amount of sales, and then Westbrook tax collector would invoice the dispensary, and they get a check. So it's a nice little add-on for cities and towns. I know Danbury, they approved 2 of them, but remember we're 44 square miles. Yeah. So it's a big geographic area. But other communities have 1 or et cetera. But again, you never do that. That wasn't a policy change for taxes. It was a policy change because people felt that it was kind of getting silly chasing around people selling marijuana when people would have a glass of wine at night. Now look, it's not my thing. Right. But I don't judge, whatever. And I will say, when this was coming up, I had taken some trips to Mass to see how they were doing it. And I actually waited in a line, and I was in Great Barrington, and I waited in line in one of the dispensaries there. Yeah. And the guy in front of me was shaking, he had a pretty violent shake going on, and so I struck up a conversation with him. And he was there, and he said without cannabis, he was out of cannabis, he was getting his medical card, right? Yeah. Yep. But he was using it for Parkinson's, and he says it really calms him. I mean, he goes, you don't see this. Right. He goes, so, and with very little hallucinogenic effect to them. So there's some uses for it that it's worked. It doesn't work for everybody with Parkinson's, but for certain kinds it works.
Now let's talk about the Connecticut highway use tax.
Yes, the HUT for the trucks. It's actually been successful.
Has it?
Yeah, and we've had over 40,000 trucking companies across the United States of America, Canada, and Mexico that have registered for it. People are paying it, and we'll fall a little bit short of, I think, our projections. And I don't remember what they were for this year, but it is working. remember that money goes into the special transportation fund.
Gotcha.
And then, so let's say we generate 50 million this year on that. We'll then take that and we can go to the federal government
Right.
and borrow $1 billion, off of that. We can use that money to leverage money from the federal government. So it really is a sound program. Nobody wants to hear this, but I'm telling you that we're making a sea change in motor vehicles, not in the short term, in the long term.
Okay.
Biggest mistake is people thought that EVs would just take over the world in 2 years. I would argue to you, if you drive around town, an EV may be your thing. But if you're driving to commute to here to New Haven or to Hartford or whatever, EVD doesn't work for you. Maybe you use a plug-in or
Right.
something else. So we're not there yet on the technology of EVs,
Okay.
but it's getting there. So eventually the conversation is going to be, as people stop buying gas, how do we fill up, because remember the gas tax goes to fill up the special transportation fund.
Right.
How do we continue to work on our roads? And eventually I think you'll see us eliminate the gas tax and go strictly to a mileage-based user fee where you could pay by the mile, you could buy your miles. There's a lot of different models that are out there. And that'll have to be done on a national level.
Okay.
Because you can't drive to Massachusetts and they have a different system, or in my case, New York State or Rhode Island, right? It just wouldn't make sense. So you're going to have a coalition of states that do this all the same way.
Now, let's talk about the refund protection program.
Yep. Okay. Sometimes it's a great question because sometimes people don't realize this, but sometimes we will hold a refund if for some reason our algorithms show that there's been suspicious activity either from that address or with that ID number, that social security number. It may be indicative of fraud, not necessarily in the person who's getting the refund, but somebody else may be using your social security number.
Right.
So that's 99% of the time that's what's happened. We hold it, we go back and check and say, well, we got 2 refund checks for you here. Do you know, why is that?
Why?
Yeah. Do you know somebody's using your social security number? That kind of thing. So it works really well to protect. So we're not just pumping out checks.
Right.
We also notice that some people run cottage industries with generating fraudulent returns that generate fraudulent refunds. And we routinely pick those apart. And by the way, it's a criminal act and it's a felony and you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. And we've had those arrests. But we also want to make sure that when you do have a refund coming, that you get it. And the best way to do that is to use a direct deposit.
Yep.
Do not file a paper return, file online. And again, we'll put it in your account within 3 business days. Particularly right now, we just killed it this year. I mean, I always hold my taxes to the end to test at our peak when we're the busiest, and I had my refund back in 2 days. And they don't know it's me. I put it through electronically. They have no idea.
They don't know it's
all
you?
done by,
Everything's done electronically?
Electronically and digitally. So yeah, boom, right there in my account.
Yeah, my mom did mine, and I had my refund back within like 2 days.
2 days, it's amazing.
She saw it, she was like, your refund is back. I'm like, when did you file those? She's like, the other day. I'm like, that's quick.
It's quick. That's quick. And even the federal government. I got a direct deposit from the IRS. I had a modest refund that came back. I think it took 7 days.
Yeah.
Not bad.
No.
It's kind of scary, actually. But anyways, so we want to be careful. And if you get a call from us or you get some kind of electronic communication, call us back. Check it out. There are a lot of scammers out there.
Right, I was going to ask that.
That are tricking people and getting them to file more or say, hey, we owe you money, and if you give us $500 gift card, we're going to give you $10,000 that we have,
Yeah, no.
And particularly our seniors get really wrapped up in this. I actually followed, I was actually in a Walgreens and a senior was trying to buy a $300 Apple card, and I stopped the transaction. And I said, sir, what do you just tell me what you're buying that for. It turns out he had a scammer. And the scammer was still on the phone. The guy's going, no, don't talk to him, don't talk to him. And I go, what are you doing this for? And it turns out it was a Eversource. It wasn't Eversource doing it, but they claimed that they were from Eversource.
Yeah, they were working for Eversource.
Right, and
wow.
so he needed to get the $300 gift card and then send it to me. I go, doesn't that sound wrong to you? And he goes, well, sort of, but they were so convincing. I go, they can be incredibly They can get into your email. They can learn your name.
Yep.
They can learn your account number, your balance. Eversource, for one example, will never call you. So you will get it in writing in the mail if you are behind on your bill or anything like that. But that's the kind of stuff we work on every day.
Wow. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's busy, but I mean, look, it's a labor of love, and it's one of the good things our agency gets to do for people. I'm not the most popular people at the garden party, okay? I'm sort of the skunk at the garden party. So anything I can do that's positive, get the refund quick, or protect the refund, or make sure that they're not getting scammed, then that's a good thing for me.
Now, you ever walk through the call center and say hello to everybody?
Oh yeah, I take calls too. I took. I do. I took them 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Really?
I'll sit there and with a headset on and spend an hour taking calls from taxpayers and answering their questions. And I have somebody with me that will. A lot of times, questions are so arcane or detailed. I don't know every single form and what line number is what. So I have somebody.
You don't know every single form? Come on.
Well, our forms, I should say that. Our state forms are easy.
Oh, okay.
But they may be referring to a federal form or something like that.
Oh,
so I always have somebody, a customer service rep with me. But this year, for example, I took 15 calls. I did 14 of the problems. There was one that would stump me. And last year it was 9 out of 10. The year before that it was like 5 out of 10.
Really?
So I've gotten better each year.
There you go.
Yeah. It's cool though. And people are surprised when I pick up the phone.
You don't tell them who we are.
I said, good morning, it's Commissioner Boughton from the Department of Revenue Services. I am here to help you. Talk to me. What can I do for you?
And they say,
And I get stuff like, geez, my refund check is going to the wrong address, or I had a gentleman that moved to Kentucky and he wanted to know what he should do. So, all kinds of questions.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure if your refund is going somewhere else, you just change the address and
that's right. And I key it all in for him and go, okay, here you are. And I'm like, I wish you hadn't waited till we sent the refund up.
Yeah, hello.
But okay, we're going to get you your money. It's all good.
Exactly. Now, now tax season's over, so what's your department up to now?
So we are working on a number of reports. I mentioned the tax gap study that we're going to post in July online. We also just completed a tax incident study, which is a lot. This is a lot of work. There's a lot of data in there. People don't understand how much work these reports are. So we'll be doing that. We finished our modernization process. That was about a $60 million upgrade to our computer system. We are filling out a lot of our positions, doing a lot of hiring right now, interviewing, promotions. Again, we had that big retirement wave last summer that we're trying to make up for. So that'll be a busy time of year. And we'll continue to ramp up as we bring in these new employees, we will continue to ramp up our auditing. So when you get hired at DRS as what we call ACT, or Account Career Trainee, it takes, I think, 14 months to get through our training program. And you have to spend time in each department. So you will spend 3 months in our call center, just answering calls. And even though people say, I didn't get hired, I say, well, you need to know what everybody does. Everybody's got to know what everybody else's job is. Then we move you over to another piece, and then so you learn the whole picture of what's going on. So at the conclusion of that, now you're ready to go out and actually do field audits, working under somebody that can provide direction for you. So we're ready to start ramping those up this summer because that group of trainees is now coming through the program and ready to go. We've had a little bit higher attrition rate than I like.
Okay.
Generally out of every 30 employees, we'll lose probably 10, which is weird because when, I remember when I first became mayor, people drove me nuts for a city job. I mean, there would be a line of people outside the door, and a lot of them wanted to work for Public Works or Parks and Rec and all those jobs, cutting grass, things like that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you can't give those jobs away.
No.
And the same problem is that we have, where everybody wanted a state job. There's a time now, it's like, meh. I mean, we offer a competitive pay package, I think. I think you started around $65,000, and once you complete that training, you go up to $72,000. These are young people, and then you move up the career ladder. You obviously make more pay, but it's interesting that people aren't really that interested in working. I'm like, okay, I don't know how you're going to pay your bills, but I guess you got to figure it out.
Yeah, people don't want to work.
They don't.
That's the problem.
They don't. Yeah. Now the people we do have, once they start, they love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we speak our own language, and it's an agency that's vital to our mission of state government, but also, people really they take to it. It's funny because we have a lot of long-termers, 25 years, 30 years, 35 years, not uncommon. That have worked for our agency.
Really?
But again, they're starting to punch out though, so
Yeah.
we're backfilling those positions now. So if you're interested, and you only need, I better get this right, I think it's 9 credit hours in accounting. So
Okay.
you don't have to be an accounting major to come work for us, but you have to have some background in accounting. So if you're interested, go on our website, drs.gov, and you can apply. We'd love to have you.
Even working in the call center, you got to have an accounting background?
Well, everybody there has, generally the call center is staffed by half full-time folks that just do that piece, customer
Yep.
service, and then half of our ECTs are in there. So, but yeah, everybody's got to have some kind of accounting background. And they learn quickly, they really do.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool watching people learn.
Now, one person we have to give a shout out to. Kim in your office.
Kim's the best.
She is.
She is the best. She's efficient. This is my assistant, folks. She is...
And she deals with me.
Which is easy.
Yeah.
But, she was there when I got there. She's efficient, friendly, kind.
Yeah.
And is organized like no other. Now, listen, I've had a lot of assistants in my political career.
Oh, yeah.
And my government career. And by far, Kim Times is the best. So proud of her and the job that she does. And, and she's friendly too, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I email her, she'll email me back.
And when she's not dealing with my nonsense, getting me to the right places, she is answering calls from tax residents that have problems, and she's solving taxpayer concerns.
Really?
So she does that too. Yeah, very good at it too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, what else is the department up to that we can educate the people about?
Yeah. So I think that we have really embraced. The conversation that we're going to have in the future is AI. And how do
let's talk about AI.
How do we adopt and integrate AI? And right now, the legislature is working on a statewide policy. The governor has a tech background. He comes from
he does?
From a digital background, so he's very interested in it. I've always been a little concerned about AI, and remember the amount of data we handle. We handle data that's very sensitive. I have to sign my life away every year, an oath, if you will. That I will make sure that I not share data about individual taxpayers.
Right.
It marries the IRS security measures. My phone is, I have a state phone that's almost unusable. I can't even take a picture with it because that might somehow allow people to get into our system. So I worry about AI being able to without the right controls, potentially causing a breach in our system. But it's there, and when I mentioned the chatbot earlier on,
Yep.
that uses AI. It learns as you ask a question. So it doesn't have to be the same person.
Right.
So Mark Boughton could call about this question, but then Pete Mezzetti could call the next day. The chatbot now remembers how it answered the same question from Mark Boughton, and it'll respond the same way to you. And it learns,
Cool.
it builds that knowledge base bigger and bigger every day. And it's really cool to watch that work. Scary, but it's cool.
It is scary, but it's cool. Now, how closely do you work with the legislature?
Very closely. So we work with the Finance Committee from this area, Representative Cheeseman, fantastic, Representative Maria Horn, Senator Martin, Senator Fanfara, all great people. We work with them. We meet with them prior to the session. A lot of times we'll have DRS bills that we need to get through, and they're very technical in nature.
Right.
Sometimes the IRS may have changed something, or there may be a new tax that we realize isn't working that well. It's difficult for us to collect, so we'll ask for some changes. And then they have stuff that they want. They always are. They're very data driven now, and I like to think I helped create that influence of data because I work with them and I always say, look, we need data so you understand the trends of where we're going, where we've been, and where we are right now. And I know from my days in the legislature, very hard to make a decision. And this is a $22 billion budget.
Yeah.
So there's big decisions to be made here. You really have to understand how it impacts everybody, who pays for it, how do they pay for it, why do they pay for it. You have to understand where the money is derived from. Does it hurt businesses? What kind of businesses? Other businesses get away scot-free, So all that it can be derived from the data that we collect. So we have now are broadening our data, and the next set of returns, the next forms, are the things that you'll have to fill out online for next year. You'll see that we're asking more questions because we want to know
Right.
Where do you get your, normally we just go off the adjusted gross income from the federal return. We want to know where you're getting your income from, so we can start making strategic decisions about what to do in the future that are based on data. So this finance committee is really concerned about that. They've got me doing 1 million studies.
Yeah.
And I have to sometimes bring in consultants, sometimes not. Sometimes we can do them in-house. But it's a lot of work to be able to give them the data they need to make informed decisions. And the governor loves that stuff too.
Now, is that Senator John Fonfara that you referenced?
Yeah.
I've seen him on CTN. He seems like a nice man.
Yeah, I've known him we were both in the legislature together. I've known him for decades.
Okay.
Really good guy,
Yeah.
solid guy. And what I like about him is he's a disruptor as well. Not disruptive, but a disruptor.
Right.
And he's very creative in his thinking. And look, big picture wise, if government's going to be sustainable, state, local, and federal, in the next 30 to 40 years, we've got to think differently. We've got to think differently. People have a limited ability to pay. And, other prices are going, as they continue to escalate, we've got to get a little smarter about what we're doing.
Now, as far as there is a bill up at the legislature that has to deal with public access television. Mm-hmm. My question to you is, in your mind, how important is public access TV to you?
It's another way in which we can get information out to residents, right? Just from our talk tonight. Mm-hmm. Not exciting. I get it. It's not you're not going to hey, did you hear the commissioner last? I understand. But it is important.
Right.
And you serve, and these types of programs across the state,
right?
Serve a viable, certainly a viable duty in presenting that information to our taxpayers.
Yes.
And it's an avenue. So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Snapchat, I'm on a medium like this, radio, and folks can really be able to understand where do they go to get some of their problems solved.
Right.
So it's critical. And it also, particularly for local government, mm-hmm. gives an opportunity for first selectmen, mayors to be able to, Board of Ed members, et cetera, mm-hmm. elected officials, go out there and tell people what they're doing, because the local press, i.e. newspapers, have pretty much fallen by the wayside.
Yeah.
And so where do you go to get information and know what's happening? And these shows provide that kind of information. Right. So hopefully that won't happen.
Yeah.
Hopefully, and you probably walk around town, people probably come up to you all the time and say, I watch your show every night.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So, you've got
in the grocery store is an experience.
Right.
Because
I saw you on TV the other night.
People want to stand there and talk to you for 20 minutes, half hour.
That's right. So let's hope they can work that out. Let's hope that they can preserve it. I believe the public access is tied to a fee on the cable bill, and I think that's, mm-hmm. and the issue is that there's a cost, right, to setting up a studio like this. This is a beautiful studio.
Thank you.
So there's a cost for that, and I believe the issue is that since people are migrating, same thing with like EVs, right?
Yep.
People are moving over to streaming, they're no longer paying the fee. They've cut the cord, right? So, Xfinity has to pay it, and some of the other cable deliverers have to pay it. But if you're just running on internet and you're using Netflix, you're not paying that fee that helps support your program or other programs too. So that's really the issue, that that money is getting smaller and smaller each year.
Yeah, and I believe session is almost over in a couple weeks.
13 days, 22 hours, and 6 minutes, depending on when this airs. But yeah.
Are you counting?
It'll be over shortly. Yes.
Are you going to be glad it's over?
Am I glad? I was a legislator, so
yes.
I like our legislators.
Right.
And I respect the fact that they're a third branch of government, and I've never, and I work for the governor, and it's his agenda that we're trying to put through. But, it always gets very frantic this time of year as people see, they got all the legislators have elections in November.
Yep.
You want to leave the legislature with, you did something. You want to tell you, look what I did. Whether it's getting a statue put up or making an amendment to taxes or whatever. Okay. Big, little, small, you want to go back and say, I did this for the district. So it can get very busy and frenetic in pace.
Commissioner Mark Boughton, we're out of time. Hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks,
Good to
bud.
see you.
See you soon. On behalf of Commissioner Mark Boughton, I'm Pete Mezzetti. Thanks, good night, and we'll see you next week.